You're listening to TGI Sports Talk with your host, Keith Angle, on Northeast Streaming Sports.
Good morning, everybody. Keith Angle for TGI Sports Talk, Friday, March 12th. Beautiful day here in East Greenbush. It's going to be a little chillier than yesterday. We got into the high 60s yesterday, and today's going to be in the mid 50s, and then we're going to get colder. But time change is coming this weekend. We're excited. So welcome to TGI Sports Talk, still the only live streaming webcast, sports webcast at least, from East Greenbush. We're happy to have all of you here. I want to thank all of you for tuning in live. Again, thank all the groups that allow me to share the content and everybody that views. We've had some tremendous viewership. We've had some tremendous rise in followers. We're also on the Northeast. We're also on the Northeast Streaming Sports Network, and you can watch all our shows there, along with all the other great shows that are part of the Northeast Streaming Sports Network. Big news coming there too. If you've joined a blog site, more news to come on that. I want to thank my guests from last week, Tony Red Bruin and Eric Santifer from Syracuse University. March Madness here with an NCAA focus. They were great guests, and we've had some great response to their appearance as well. And I want to remind all of you to please check out Eric's book, Everyday God, Promises Made, Promises Kept. Check that book out. That'll be coming out soon. And, of course, Tony's clothing collection. It's Red's Collection. You can see that at redscollection.net. And I do have a link on the TGI Sports Talk page to that. My guest today is scheduled to be Butch Lee. Butch is one of my favorite players from back in my late teens. He was part of the NCAA 1977 NCAA champion Marquette Warriors. Butch is running a bit late. He's with his wife and trying to get himself hooked up remotely. So we hope to have Butch with us in a few minutes. If not via video, then at least via phone. But we'll talk about Butch. Butch had a tremendous college career. He played for Marquette from roughly the 74-75 season, not roughly, from the 74-75 season to the 77-78 season. Won, some of college basketball's. In his senior year, he won some of college basketball's most prestigious awards. He was a consensus first-team All-American. He was a Naismith College Player of the Year. He was the AP College Player of the Year. He won the Adolph Rupp Trophy, the UPI Player of the Year. You can't win many trophies, and Butch won in 1978. Then he was drafted to the pros, and he was on his way to a very successful career when a knee injury that today you may have recovered from, back then you didn't. So we'll talk to Butch about his time at Marquette with the legendary Al McGuire, that magical 1976-77 season where they won the NCAA championship after they barely got in a tournament. Al McGuire had announced his retirement. I want to talk to Butch about his relationship with Al McGuire. So we'll dive into all of that. Also, by the way, Butch's son, Matthew, is a standout player with St. Peter's in the MAC tournament, or the MAC conference, the same conference that Siena plays in here locally. And it's good basketball. They are now in the semifinals after having beaten, let's see, who they beat yesterday. I forget. They beat Ryder yesterday, probably not unexpectedly. Siena did get upset by Iona in the first round, but we now have got a rooting interest in St. Peter's and Matthew Lee. He played very well yesterday. I think eight points, 4 assists for Matthew. They're going to be playing today in the semifinals, as I mentioned, against Fairfield. And if things stay true to form, they'll be playing Rick Pitino and Iona for a right to go to the NCAA tournament. So While we wait for Butch, we'll talk a little bit about some stuff coming up. We've got Sunday's show, our normal show. We'll be focusing, on the NCAA college conference tournaments. Some of them will have wrapped up on Saturday. Some will be finishing up Sunday. We've got the selection show Sunday night. We're going to be going live on March 31st with our Final Four preview show. That should be a lot of fun. And don't forget, as we get closer to the football draft, it's a ways off yet, but April 29th, we're going to go live. We're going to do the entire first round of the NFL draft live right here on TGI Sports Talk and the Northeast Streaming Sports Network. Actually, that show will be hosted by Mac and Jack from the Mac and Jack Sports Show, and I'll be co-hosting, but we will be streaming it on TGI Sports Talk as well. So as we continue to kind of stretch for Butch, hopefully it won't be too much longer. We'll say good morning to Dave Guyette. Welcome, Dave. Anybody else that's here with us? We'll take a quick look until Butch gets here. Let's just take a quick look at some of the scores from yesterday. I mean, there's been some interesting developments as we've gone through the conference tournaments. No, and some not so surprising things. In the Big East, unfortunately, St. John's lost in overtime yesterday. They were my pick to win the tournament. They lost, played very poorly. They shot like 32%. They forced about 15, 16 turnovers, but really couldn't put the ball in the bucket. The big story yesterday was Georgetown upsetting Villanova. Maybe not surprisingly with Villanova's injury issues that will certainly come into play when they get into the big dance next week. Also, UConn just rolled yesterday over, it's skipping my brain here. Who the heck did they play? UConn had rolled over DePaul. DePaul is very bad. I was surprised they even got by Providence, but they did. We just talked about Seton Hall beating St. John's. Seton Hall actually comes out of this smelling very good because they get to play Georgetown now in the semifinals, where UConn will have to play a very good Creighton team in their semifinal bracket. So it's going to be interesting in the Big East. Let's just jump around a little bit. Some other scores as we kind of still wait for my guest, Butch Lee, to show up. Again, welcome. Hope you'll stick around and listen to Keith talk about NCAA basketball for a little bit. Some surprises yesterday. Let's see. No surprise with Baylor other than maybe they struggled a little bit more than we would have thought with Kansas State. Ohio State struggles with Minnesota, but wins. Minnesota just finished the season on a total downer. I mean, they had them in the tournament right through just 2 weeks ago. And they haven't won a road game the entire season, and they've lost 7 or 8 games in a row. West Virginia gets a mild upset over Oklahoma State. Big 12 is going to send a boatload of teams. They've got some really good teams, guys. The first, 24 seeds, half of them at least are going to come from, and probably more, are going to come from, or possibly more, are going to come from the Big 12 and the Big 10. Other scores, Texas squeaks by Texas Tech, 2 other really good teams in the Big 12. We talked about Georgetown. Big story with Duke. Duke had a positive test for COVID. They're out of the ACC tournament. Good morning, Bob and Jeanette Engel. How are you? We're still waiting on my guest, Butch. Butch had a minor distraction come up this morning. He's hoping to join me here as soon as possible. So we're stretching a little bit until he shows up. Where else? I was talking about Duke. They had a positive COVID test. They're out of the ACC tournament. They're out of the NCAA tournament. So Florida State gets a bye basically into the semifinals today. Syracuse played a really, really good game against Virginia after blowing out NC State. Syracuse is probably still on the bubble. It may depend on what some other teams do, what kind of upsets happen in these one bid conferences. I'm sorry, not one bid conferences, but I guess the one bid conferences where the tournament champions get upset. We talked about Creighton winning big. Carolina with a nice win over Georgia Tech. Carolina solidifies their spot in the tournament. Colorado with a win over California. They're likely in the tournament. And USC wins over Utah. Maryland handily defeats Michigan State, putting Michigan State after a great run to get back in the conversation, securely back on the bubble, unfortunately for them. But Maryland probably has secured a spot in the tournament, most likely with this move into the quarters in the Big Ten. Other scores, Larry Frank will be interested in South Florida having beat Temple yesterday in the American Conference. Really good basketball league, guys. Kentucky season ends as we kind of expected it to. No late surge, winning the conference tournament and finding their way into the big dance. They're not going to go dancing. 2 blue bloods at least, Duke and Kentucky, out of the big dance. Any other surprises yesterday? Florida over Vanderbilt, no surprise. Georgia Tech beats Miami. Talked about St. John's. St. John's had a great season, guys. Mike Anderson did a great job. We'll probably talk about this when I go on with Mac and Jack at 9:15. Champagne makes the first team All Big East team. Mike Anderson wins the Coach of the Year. Posh Alexander was a Freshman of the Year. Just a really good season for St. John's, and they're ahead of where they expected to be at this point. The experts had them pegged for 9th or 10th in the Big East, and they actually finished 4th. So they did a great job. We talked about St. Peter's and Butch Lee's son, Matthew, contributing to the St. Peter's win over Rider yesterday. UCLA gets beat by Oregon State. Could hurt UCLA's chances of getting in. I think they'll make the big tournament, but losing to Oregon State, not a good Oregon State, is not going to bode well for them. Boise State, who is primed to be an at-large berth here just a week ago, 10 days ago, and they proceeded to lose their last 4 or 5 games. They lose to Nevada. They're probably gone from the tournament. Rutgers beats Indiana. Indiana is in disarray. We went from talking about them being an NCAA bubble team to Archie Miller's not going to keep his job most likely, and they're going to move on from that. Rutgers now is probably solidified their spot in the NCAA tournament. They may need one more victory here in the Big Ten tournament. Well, we'll see. I think they're in. I kind of think Syracuse is in too, by the way. We'll take a look at Joe Lenardi's bracketology here in a second if Butch doesn't get with us shortly. What else? Just looking through the scores here quickly. Anything stand out? Oh, gosh. Ole Miss. Ole Miss is a good story. 76-59 over a bad North Carolina team, but they're making a little run through the SEC tournament here, and they put themselves squarely in the conversation to be in the tournament if they haven't already solidified that spot. Oregon beats Arizona State handily. Billy Hurley's got to be in trouble at Arizona State. They have underperformed now multiple seasons in a row. This is a season like no other, obviously. But I think he's got to be in a little trouble. Bobby Hurley, sorry. I said Billy Hurley. UConn, as we said, rolled over DePaul. And Wisconsin with a big win over Penn State. Wisconsin kind of put themselves on the bubble here. So we'll see what happens. I mean, today's schedule, let's look at it quickly. I mean, as we get towards the semis and the championship games of these tournaments. The A10 championship game is coming up Sunday. St. Bonaventure against VCU and St. Bonnie's. I think they're both in. They're playing for a better seed probably here. I think they're both going to make the tournament. In the ACC, you have North Carolina left. Hold on here. How come I'm not where I want to be? Here we go. So we got Georgia Tech playing Virginia. We've got North Carolina playing Florida State. Two pretty good matchups. Virginia struggled a little bit. They did get by Syracuse, as I said yesterday, on a buzzer beater in yesterday. Florida State got a bye when Duke had the COVID problem. So Florida State's got a really good team, but they've stumbled down the stretch here a little bit. So we'll see what they do. Be very interesting. Carolina's playing very up and down basketball for them, but good sign that they've won a couple of games now in a row here in the tournament. Concentrating basically on the bigger leagues here. The American Conference, you're looking at today. You got South Florida against Wichita State. Wichita State playing really good basketball. Florida State's probably got to win this tournament to get in the NCAAs, but we're still playing quarterfinals here, guys. We got 4 games in this tournament left. Wichita State, again, on the bubble, needs a couple more wins to solidify their spot. You got Cincinnati at SMU, which is going to be a good game. Tulane at number 7, Houston. And then UCF at Memphis. Memphis had a heartbreaker last week against Houston. They were really propped up early in the year, and they struggled early in the year, and they slowly were rebuilding their record and their confidence and just everybody's opinion of them. And they had lost a heartbreaker to Houston last week, but Houston's a real good team. They're ranked 7th in the country. But you still got, Wichita State, SMU, and Houston with a shot to get in the NCAA from that conference. I think Memphis and Cincinnati, the other teams that are left here, will have to win the tournament to get in. The Big 12. Oh, this thing keeps going back to yesterday. It's very annoying. Semifinals tonight. Oklahoma State against number 2 Baylor. Baylor again came back from a long COVID shutdown and undefeated. Obviously, they've been vying with Gonzaga for the number 1 slot overall in the tournament much of the year. They did come back and lose, but not a really bad loss. And they're starting to right the ship. They're playing very well. They did struggle a bit yesterday with Kansas State, but this should be a good game. All these teams are going to make the the NCAA tournament. So they're basically playing for seeding here. And Texas will play Kansas. All these teams are ranked in the top 13 teams in the country. Great league, the Big 12 this year. They're going to get a bunch of bids. Let's move on to the Big East. We talked about this already, but we'll talk about it real quick again. Georgetown plays Seton Hall tonight, and UConn plays Creighton. I would say Seton Hall. I still think Seton Hall needs to win this tournament. Some people will say if they get to the final, they're probably in, but I don't think so. I think they need to win the tournament. Right now, they're in the last 4 out, I believe, on Joe Lunardi's bracketology. But UConn and Creighton are definitely in the tournament. Georgetown would have to win the tournament, obviously, to get in as well. Next. Sorry if I yelled. Quarterfinals in the Big Ten. Maryland plays Michigan. Maryland might need another win to get in the tournament. But Michigan's obviously, and they're one of the top 4 seeds possibly right now. You got Ohio State playing Purdue. Purdue has played really, really good basketball down the stretch, has played their way into the tournament. Rutgers, depending on who you listen to, is either solidly in or at least solidly on the bubble. Maybe one more victory, but they're playing the number 3 team in the country in Illinois today. It's going to be very tough for them. So they better play well, and they better hope that they're already in, is my thought. And then you got Wisconsin at number 5, Iowa. Got a soft spot in my heart for Iowa, as I always tell people when we start talking about the NCAA. Fran McCaffrey is their coach and did a great job here at Siena and got them to a couple of NCAA tournaments, which is not a regular occurrence. So the Big Ten's wide open still. We're going to talk more about this. I may be coming in. I haven't done it yet because I haven't found a really good spot to really come on live and watch some games because they're kind of sporadic in the way they're being played. So, but we'll see as we go in through the weekend. I may jump in from time to time. Not really crazy about some of these one bid leagues. If I miss somebody, feel free to say, hey, what about so-and-so? Let's jump to the Pac-12. Again, this league is down a bit this year. A lot of the leagues are down this year. It's been a weird year with COVID, right? It's hard to get any kind of rhythm going when you get teams constantly shut down. Now, some teams did go clean and not have a problem all year long, and other teams had multiple stoppages. Think UConn, who really has come back nicely from theirs. Think Baylor. Think Iona, who went 56 days without playing a game. So we'll stop there because it looks to be my guest, Butch Lee, has made it. Masked up and all. Butch is in a medical facility. Nothing major. He had to take his wife for a procedure. So let's bring Butch in with no further ado so we can cover what we need to cover. Good morning, Butch.
How you doing, Keith?
Good. I'm glad you could make it.
Can you hear me okay?
You're not robbing a bank or anything right now, are you?
No. It's just that I'm with someone. Once they go out, I'm going to be able to take my mask off.
Okay, no problem. So welcome. I'm glad you could make it to the show. I know you had a little situation this morning, so I'm glad that you were able to kind of get with us, and I appreciate you going out of your way to do that. I talked a little bit in the opening about your tremendous career at Marquette and especially your senior year where you won a ton of awards. I mean, you won almost every award that you can win in college basketball, and obviously you were part of that great 1977 championship team. I lost you there, Butch. There you are.
Yeah.
So let's chat a little bit. I want to start a little bit. I mean, you were born in Puerto Rico and you moved to New York as a young man, a child, I guess, right? And you were a standout basketball player in the public school league there. Talk to me a little bit about the recruiting process and how you ended up at Marquette with Al McGuire.
A lot of things happen very fast with Marquette, but my recruiting process in the summer after my junior year, we had won the city championship, and that summer I went to 5-star camp, and I was almost fighting with Garfinkel and those guys. I didn't want to go in the beginning, so I went to a 5-star camp. I broke the scoring record, which still stands at 50 points in one game. And when I got back home, I was getting letters, 5, 3, 4, 5 letters every day. And that's how the recruiting process started. And I don't know at what point Marquette got involved, but everything happened very fast with Marquette. They had a great team that had just went to the NCCA finals.
Yeah.
And, I saw Marcus Washington. He was a senior and he was graduating. So I figured I can actually become a starter on a top team in the country right away. So I like that. I didn't know how Marquette played their style or anything, but I just liked having that opportunity to be on that big stage as a freshman.
Were there other teams? What were the other teams that were possibly in the finals to get Butch Lee?
Well, I went to visit the University of Pennsylvania, Jacksonville, and also I visited Duke, which it wasn't the Duke that it is now, but still they had a good program, and I was a little interested.
Did you visit Marquette before you went there?
Yeah, I visited Marquette also, and what happened with Marquette is that I really liked the guys on the team. Earl Tatum, Bo Ellis, Lloyd Walton. I felt right at home, and I thought that that was the clincher, really, when I met those guys.
I got to tell you a funny story that Tom Keegan told me when we did the Big East preview show the other night, and I want to make sure I give him credit for this. He was talking about Al McGuire when Al was at Belmont Abbey, and he got this great recruit from New York City, and one of the other coaches asked him, well, how did you ever get this guy to go to Belmont Abbey? He says, well, I just took him and showed him the campus, and he loved it. Well, he didn't take him to Belmont Abbey, though. He took him to Chapel Hill and showed him the Chapel Hill campus. And that's how he got him to go. I'm assuming it's a true story if Tom told it. So tell me about...
there's a page on Facebook wits of Al McGuire.
Yeah, I
And
love it.
I've learned so many things over these last years that I didn't know. You know, that Al was such a character. I feel blessed that we had the group that we did. And between Rick, Hank, and Al, you know, you couldn't ask for a better coaching staff and better people to grow up around.
You know, I had that. I had Lloyd Walton, who I know you know, played with you for a couple of years at Marquette, on a couple of months ago, and he said the same thing about the coaching staff and the guys. You know, he said he butted heads with Al now and again, which I'm sure a lot of the players did. I mean, what was your relationship like with Al?
No, I had a great relationship with Al. You know, I tell you, I learned so much with him, and I'm gonna tell you a good story, baby. I'm gonna
Sure.
just sit down right here. I'm gonna sit
Yeah.
down. My leg is
Take,
hurt. I'm gonna sit down. I was just talking to my wife.
tell her hello for us.
Yeah, hello. I'm just gonna sit down right here, baby. But put your hand there so I can see it. How's that? Yeah, I can hear you. You're not gonna. My wife is in one of those hyperbaric chamber that LeBron James uses,
Oh, really?
and so it's like amazing. It's very noisy in here, and I didn't know this was gonna happen today, but it's good. You
That's
know what
okay. It
happened
all
with
worked
me and
out.
Al? When I was a freshman, I had 7 turnovers in a game. And he would always talk at the practice. He would always talk with the players. Everybody was like in a circle around him. And he told me that I could not be that bad. He said that the worst guy on my high school team is not that bad. And I just started crying in front of the whole team. You know, I felt so bad. And I never got mad at him or anybody. I just kept working, and then like it happened like he wanted and happened like I wanted. But that was a tough moment for me as a freshman. But we was able to make it happen years after.
Well, you were a major contributor, right? You know, as you said, from your freshman year on, and you played with some great players. You were with Bo Ellis for 4 years. You guys came in the same freshman class, right?
No, I was a year behind Bo. Bo was the
Really?
first guy to start as a freshman at
Oh, right.
Marquette, and I
That's right.
came the year after.
That's right, because you said you had joined a great team, as you mentioned, that went to the NCAA final the year before against NC State. I forgot that Bo was a freshman on that team. Um, did you feel pressure coming in? The team was obviously very highly ranked, and I mean, did you feel pressure with that team coming off a NCAA final?
You know what happened? Like I guess with so many young players now, everybody feels that they're the best player around. So at that time, I was playing pretty good. So I didn't. I thought I could get in there and I could do the job. Not knowing how difficult it was because even though I started when the games got tough, he would bring in Dave Delsman, who was a senior backup guard,
Yeah.
and he would kind of help me through any kind of tough moments I had. But I had a lot of confidence, but it was tough in the beginning.
Well, you had a couple other good guards on that team too, and Earl Tatum and Lloyd Walton, as I mentioned before. So really good team to come in and get your career started with. Um, as you go through, I mean, you guys were regular participants in the NCAA tournament. That first year, you lost in the first round to a really good Kentucky team. Every team you lost to that I can think of in your run was, I mean, they either went on and won the tournament or they were, very close to winning the tournament. I think Kentucky lost in the final that year to UCLA, if I remember right. But the next year you go and you have a much better year. Obviously, you start to really grow as a player, um, and you get to a regional final and lose to Indiana in a tough matchup. You guys had some tough matchups in the NCAA back then. There was no cupcakes in that tournament, right? There was only 32 teams, probably.
Well, yeah, and that was the problem we had. Today that wouldn't happen because Indiana was ranked number one, we were ranked number two. So we
Yeah,
probably wouldn't have met until the finals. But at that time, since both of us were in the Midwest, we almost had the championship game in the regional.
Yeah, that's a great point. That it's so much different today. They try to, really get parity in the brackets, right? So they'll split up the really good teams. So back then, if you had a really bunch of really good teams in the Midwest, which it normally did, that was a tough bracket. Before we get into the 76, 77 season, which really was obviously a special season, I'm sure, for you and everybody. Going into that year, obviously you're again very highly ranked, and you had some struggles through that year. There was some doubt, I think, towards the end of the year if you'd make the tournament at all, and went on a good run. Around the time Al announced he was going to retire, I mean, did that have an effect? How did that affect you, and how did that affect the team?
That was the craziest thing. Well, the second craziest thing, the first craziest thing that we won the national championship. But second was, when Al announced his retirement, it's like the world was ending. Nobody knew what was going on, and I'm there thinking that the coaches stay as long as the players stay, or the players go before the coaches do, like had been the history in the past. And when he announced that he was going to be stepping down, we didn't really know what to expect. But we went into a tailspin. I think we lost like 3 games in a row, and it was a difficult time for us. The summer before that, I played in the Olympics with Puerto Rico, and I was telling Bernard Toom that we would write letters, and I was telling him, no, this is our year. We're going to win the championship this year. And I had that in my mind, so even though we struggled a little bit, I think we lost some games, but we still had the confidence that we had a big-time team, and we could win the national championship.
What was the trigger, do you think? I mean, obviously you guys got hot just before the tournament, and you won. You had a couple nail biters in that tournament against Kansas State, and obviously in the Final Four against Charlotte, which was just a crazy game. But what was the trigger that really you think got you guys going in that direction and got you on that hot streak?
Well, different people had different stories. We had the first game against Cincinnati in the tournament. That was pretty tough. We had an altercation with Coach McGuire and Bernard Toom at halftime in the locker room. And for me, I remember I had a friend that played with Kansas State, and we were down like 10 points almost the whole game. And I kept thinking to myself, how are we going to win the championship if we can't win this game? So I was very nervous, and probably that's the most difficult game that I remember in my college career. That nail biter we had against Kansas State.
Bernard and I think I talked a bit about this with Lloyd Walton as well. That Alan and Bernard had a very rocky relationship from time to time.
Keith, this machine makes a lot of noise, so I can't hear all your questions. So excuse the noise, and if I stray from the questions a little bit.
That's okay. Let me see if I can crank myself up a little bit. Do you hear me better? That's okay. We'll do the best we can here. Tell me a little bit about. I was talking about Bernard Toon and Al McGuire, and they obviously had a kind of a love-hate relationship. That altercation they had in the Cincinnati game. I mean, that wasn't the first time that they had faced off a little bit, right?
Well, that happened with Bernard Toom and Al McGuire, but before I got there, I heard some other stories with Al, so that was like a regular thing with him. Al was very, very strict about us doing our work in the classroom, and also with his basketball. But he let us be ourselves. We weren't any robots and stuff, so he gave us that leeway. Even though he would fight with you every once in a while, he would let you be yourself. Bo and Lloyd Walton with the big hats and the fancy clothes, and me and you and Euless Payne, we were like the nerds. The nerds on the team, and but everybody did their thing. We had a lot of different characters, but we meshed together pretty well on the basketball floor.
What did it feel like? I mean, when you guys got to the final, well, tell me a little bit about the Charlotte game, I guess. I mean, that game was crazy, especially at the end. it was touch and go for you guys to get by a very surprising Charlotte team. It was surprising that they were there at all, right? But
Yeah.
tell us about that game a little bit. What's your memories of the semifinal game?
Well, one of the things I remember about that game, my parents were at the game, and my mother was so nervous that she couldn't. She had to leave. She didn't even see the end of the game. She was so nervous she had to go out in the hallway and everything. But that was a nail biter. That the score was tied. That kind of makes it a little easier when you have to make the last shot. But I remember Al coming out on the court and looking at the scoreboard. Nobody knew what he was doing. He just walked out there by himself and started looking around, looking up at the scoreboard that was hanging in the middle. And I guess afterward we found out he was looking to see if I can throw the long court pass without interfering with the with the scoreboard.
Yeah.
I use that sometimes. I talk a lot of basketball, and I always say a lot of people don't do it, but you need your good players or your best player taking out the ball. That's not an easy thing to do, and that's what happened at that time. I took out the ball, and I was able to get the ball at least in the free throw area where Jerome took over from there.
It was certainly an exciting play to watch as a fan, and I was a very big fan of those teams back in that day. For whatever reason, I gravitated to that team in my late teens. I'm only a little bit younger than you, unfortunately, for me and for you, I guess. That takes us to the final. You guys play obviously one of the best, one of the blue chip teams in the history of basketball in North Carolina. I think every player that started on that game made it to the NBA or was drafted into the NBA. Correct?
Yeah, I think North Carolina has 7 guys from that team that got drafted in the NBA, and we also had 7. They were a big time team,
Yeah.
and that gave me a little revenge because I played against Phil Ford and Dean Smith, Walter Davis in the Olympics, and so I had a chance. They beat me in the Olympics, so I had a chance to get back at those guys. Uh, in that game. Jimmy Boylan was also a good friend of O'Curran, so they kind of met back up also.
Oh, interesting. Well, I'm going to circle back to the Olympics in a second, but that North Carolina game, you guys were fairly decent sized underdog. You'd already had 7 losses, which nobody, I don't think, had ever made the finals with 7 losses, much less one at that point in time. It happens all the time today, right? Because of the
Yeah,
number of
but
games they play.
that was a little deceiving. Those 7 losses, and Al, I didn't know. We always thought we were going to get to the tournament, but Al had us concerned about that, so we would make sure we played our best game every time coming up to the finals, to the our final game when we finally got the notice. But we had a great team that year, and the 7 losses was no way indicative of the team we had. So.
Oh, I agree.
But you never know what the NCAA is going to decide. So Al was saying he was a little nervous. I don't know if he was or not.
Did you have any doubt in your mind you were going to beat Carolina that night?
No. Once we got to the final game, as I said, during the whole year, we were pretty confident that we could win this national championship. And I think once we got to that final game, it was going to be very hard to stop us at that point.
What was it like at the end of that game? And I remember, very vividly Al being overcome by emotion, a different kind. I mean, Al was often overcome by emotion, right? But not that type of emotion.
The good kind and the bad one.
Yeah. I mean, it was certainly different to see Al McGuire crying on the sidelines. I mean, what was your, what was it? How did you interact with him after the game?
No. Everybody was pretty. We were pretty excited and stuff, but I was kind of like a cool character, and Al was too. So we didn't get that crazy. We hugged and we cried and everything, and it just was a great moment. My whole basketball career was so crazy, and that was one of them. That's probably the best moment in my basketball career, winning the national championship. You dream about that as a young kid. You watch the college games, and on the weekends after the games are over, you go and play in the parks. and you're going to be David Thompson. The other guy's going to be Bill Walton. So to finally be the ones that the people were going to imitate, that was a great moment for us at Marquette.
Well, again, you played on some great teams. When Al retires, the reins get handed over to Hank Raymond, who you obviously had a lot of respect for as well. And you guys still had a really good team in your senior year. You were ranked number 1 at different times during the season. Then you had a tough loss in the first round to Miami of Ohio. I mean, how did it stupid question, I guess, is how did it feel to end your college career that way? But I mean, it had to be an awful day for you, I'm thinking.
You know that we had already won. That was a buffer. That was a little buffer for us. But, to end your season like that, it's incredible because, we were the defending champions thinking that we were going to be able to win again. But imagine most of the teams in the country have that feeling like your tournament or your season comes to an end so abruptly. My son last night, we watched him play. He's at St. Peter's.
Yeah.
And it's crazy as a parent, so I understood how my mother feels. When you're out there on the court, you're giving it all, your all, and you don't really realize the significance of everything that you do. But the fans, I think, take it even harder than the players, since that's what we're out there to do.
Yeah, I agree. So, again, through your 4 years, you play on some tremendous teams. One that won the national championship. Of all the teams you played on at Marquette, was the championship team the best team, or were some of those other teams better?
I joke with Bo Ellis and those guys because we had an activity, and a lot of people like to say that we weren't the best team and that they had other teams better than us. And I joked and told them that's the only team that had the Player of the Year, the 1977 team. So that probably must have been the difference.
It must have been a difference because I mentioned earlier when I did the intro, there isn't much more you could have won in your senior year. I mean, you're first team All-American, API Player of the Year, UPI Player of the Year, Naismith College Player of the Year, Adolph Rupp Trophy. I'm probably missing something like Outstanding Player of the Final Four. I mean, gosh, you can't get any better than that. Before I jump in, so congratulations on a tremendous college career. And before I go forward a little bit, I want to circle back to that Olympic experience that you talked about. Tell me how that happened. I mean, am I wrong that you wanted to play on the U.S. team, but there was something happened, so you end up playing for Puerto Rico?
Well, everybody, that's another thing. When you're growing up as a basketball player, a young basketball player, it's a couple of things that you want. You want to play in the Olympics, and then you want to win a national championship. So I got a chance to do both. I was interested in the USA team, but it's more that they interested in you.
Yeah.
They had already invited Earl, Tatum, Lloyd Walton, and Bo Ellis, so they're not going to invite our whole team. I was just a sophomore at the time, so I didn't feel one way or another. I had already after the summer after my freshman year, I had been playing in Puerto Rico, so they had been going to the Olympics. So I thought I was going to make the Puerto Rico national team. So I knew I would eventually make it to the Olympics. So that's what happened. I wasn't upset or anything that I wasn't on the USA team because they had invited 3 of our older players. But it gave me an opportunity to shine. I was able to do more with the Puerto Rican team that I probably would have if I played on the USA team. So that was a big moment and a showcase game for me, I guess. We played slow at Marquette, so I never scored that many points. But in Puerto Rico, I had a little more flexibility offensively, and I was able to make 35 points that game.
Yeah, you guys went from a 35-mile-an-hour speed limit to about 60, I think, or 65 in that regard, right? Now, you played, and you almost single-handedly. Now, the U.S. at that time, well, throughout history, I guess, except for 72, which is a story all into itself, the Olympic team, the U.S. had dominated for years, winning gold medals. You almost single-handedly led that Puerto Rico team to a win over the U.S. You only lost by 1, right?
Yeah, we lost by 1 point, and Puerto Rico, they have a lot of players they call Neo Ricans, and that's Puerto Rican players that grew up in the states.
Yeah.
A lot of them were from New York, so they played a similar style of game as the U.S. players. So we weren't afraid, and we had some good talent there. That was one game. Probably that would have ended differently if we played in a series, but that one game we showed up big. Me and the team, but especially the other guard, Neftali Rivera. He had a great game. He had 26 points also. So between the backcourt, we had over 50 points, which was a lot at that time.
Yeah, I remember in those days. I remember watching some of those Puerto Rico teams play in international competition, Pan Am games or Olympic games, and they always had exciting teams with a chance to win. So it would have been a tremendous upset still if you'd beaten the U.S. That would have been a tremendous story for you guys. Did any of your teammates? Did Bo make that team?
No, nobody else played on that team. We did. I did have a good friend of mine that played with me in high school at DeWitt Clinton High School. That was Steve Shepard. Played on the USA team he was from the University of Maryland. So I'm going to guess that that's probably the only time you had high school teammates playing in the Olympics, especially facing each other.
Interesting stuff. So your college career ends and you get drafted. You go pretty high, I think 10th to the Hawks. You were the first Puerto Rican player to play in the NBA, I believe. And I guess you were also the first player to win an NBA championship, an NCAA championship, and the BSN, which is a championship in Puerto Rico, right?
Yeah, that's So I'm probably the only player with all those titles, international, if you could consider Puerto Rico international tournament, high school, college, and the NBA. So I'm very proud of that. That's good for my family, my sons. They get out of line. I have to remind them of that because both of them are pretty good players. I
Yeah.
have to kind of hold that over their head a little bit.
Well, they got something to chase. That's a good thing. So your professional career gets started with the Hawks. I think you got traded in the middle of your rookie season. Um, you were obviously, I think, on a trajectory to be a very good NBA player. You were improving year after year, and you had a knee injury that, gosh, I guess, Butch, if it happened today, your career may not have been over. But did that knee injury, I'm assuming, effectively ended your NBA career, even though you did try to come back from it?
Yeah, that was a little tough, because you grow up. I was expecting I was going to have a long career. My first game with Atlanta Hawks, I think I scored 18 or 20 points in my first game as a rookie. So I was really looking forward to it. The NBA, the game is a lot freer, it's a lot more open, and you have more minutes. So I was looking to do a great job, but it didn't turn out that way. Like that's my story, for example. But at least I got a chance to play with maybe two of the greatest of all time, which is Magic Johnson, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. So I kind of went full circle from growing up in Harlem playing basketball to winning an NBA championship and playing with those great players. So it turned out pretty good. It's a good story.
You did have a great career. What? Let me ask you the difference from going from Marquette to the NBA and playing for Coach McGuire and Coach Raymond's, and you get to the NBA and you're playing for guys like QB Brooks and Bill Fitch. I mean, are they different? Is the difference really palatable between the coaching and the way you're coached, or is it not that big a difference?
Well, I don't think it's that big of a difference, but like one difference that Al McGuire made, he said he couldn't coach in the NBA because he couldn't coach a player that made more money than him. So
Right.
I guess after a while, that might have something to do with it. At that time, we didn't make as much money as they make now, so the coaches still had a lot of power. But you still have to play tough defense. You have to work with your teammates and stuff, and it's pretty similar. The biggest difference, why I say my NCAA championship was my best moment. In college you become brothers and friends and family, so it's a lot more uh, united. than in the NBA. In the NBA, everybody have their family, they have their groupies, and you don't have that same camaraderie as you have in the college, and that's what makes it a little more exciting for the basketball players when you win in the NCAA. I remember I mentioned to one of my friends, you know, in the NCAA tournament, that's the only place you see the guys that win they cry, and the guys that lose that they cry. Everybody is crying in the NCAA tournament.
Right. To go back to Marquette, I mean, when you guys, when you were there, and for a long time even after, Marquette was not part of a league. They were an independent and were able to play a great schedule because they could, schedule all over the country and play all the top teams. And I probably, for financial reasons and scheduling reasons, they had to eventually join a league, and they joined the Big East. What are your thoughts on that? Is it better for them now being in the Big East, or?
I think it's better. You know, it's hard being an independent because then you're competing against the whole country. You know, I remember when I was at Marquette as a young player, me and Phil Ford, we were like first team All American in high school. And I would have to read in a newspaper or in a magazine that Phil Ford was freshman of the year, rookie of the year, that type of stuff. So we weren't in a conference, so you didn't get any of those accolades, you know. And that makes a difference, I guess, when you're in a conference. You can be like the the leading assist guy in the conference, or the leading rebounder, and I guess that's going to be good for the players. You know, you get a chance to see where you're ranked amongst your peers, at least in your conference. So I think that's a good thing for the college players.
Now, how do you feel about, I guess, where Marquette has gone or been since your time there? There's been some up and downs, obviously, through the years. When actually a coach that I know very well, Mike Dean, who coached Siena, who plays in the MAC where your son is now, he was the coach for a while. He had some success for a few years. Tom Crean had some success, but they're really struggling and scuffling now. I mean, what are your thoughts on the program where it stands now? And I guess the coaching situation, and maybe based on something you told me earlier, maybe you don't want to get into it too much, but what are your thoughts, I guess, from 10,000 feet anyway?
Well, you know, it's so crazy because I remember Al McGuire. It was Al McGuire and John Wooden at UCLA. They had like about 10 seasons of 20 wins or more. They were like 1-2, and you can get spoiled. You know, I feel very blessed that we had the great teams we had. You know, we had sellouts for every game when I was a senior, and probably for my whole career there. But you get a little spoiled because it's so difficult to win in college basketball, and that's like probably a hard pill for Milwaukee and the Marquette fans because you win a national championship, and whenever you win, it's kind of hard to appreciate how hard that is. So now that we're in the middle of the pack with every other school, we kind of back to reality as far as what other coaches face. You know, you had guys that had strings like Duke and North Carolina, you know, winning games and winning a lot of games. As I mentioned, UCLA, and that's just hard to do, you know.
Yeah.
And you really can't judge the Marquette program solely on what we were able to do in the '70s because we had some great teams that it's hard to, especially now you have one and done. We had guys they were three and done, but it's
Right.
similar to what you have now, so it's kind of hard to keep competing at that same level, winning championships, getting to the Final Four. So I kind of feel for all the college coaches, really knowing how hard it is to do what UCLA and Marquette was able to do over the years.
Well, you did some coaching after your playing career too, I think, right? Tell us what Butch Lee's been doing since your NBA career, and some of the things you've got going on now. I know you got a Facebook page about point guards. I don't know if you run a camp for point guards or whatnot, but
Yeah, I have a sign company here in San Juan, and that's pretty much what keeps us busy in the San Juan area. And then every time, every once in a while, I might get a chance to coach, especially when my oldest son was here. I coached in the Superior League, and that was kind of good keeping them around basketball. I had some basketball academy here where I was teaching the guys how to be point guards.
Yeah.
So it's good. It's difficult because instead of just taking care of your own self, you have to remember and all the stuff that you were able to do and try to translate that so the younger guys can kind of understand it, you know. So it's a little delicate balance, but I love basketball and I love teaching basketball and helping guys with basketball.
You have coaching aspirations now?
Uh, I'm busy. I'm very busy right now with my family, just trying to keep a tabs on my on Matthew, that he's a sophomore at St. Peter's, and Brandon, my young one, he's a 14-year-old, one of the top players here in Puerto Rico. So I have
Really?
my hands full with those guys. And anybody that has a 14-year-old son, they kind of probably know how hard that is.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure. Well, at least you only got them in the house one at a time, kind of.
That's the
So,
good part.
well, Matthew, listen, congratulations on Matthew's career up to now. He seems to be growing as a player. He's been an integral part of that St. Peter's team, who's in the semifinals now with the MAC. And if everything holds to form, they'll be playing against Rick Pitino and Iona in the final. That'd be an exciting game.
Yeah, I know Rick Pitino. You know, we were at Five Star Camp. He was a coach and I was a player. But he's a great coach, and that's a big thing for the MAC to have him in that conference. Let's see how St. Peter's keep moving forward. You know, I'm expecting good things from them. So let's see what happens.
Yeah, I hope so too for you. Since Sienna's out, I'll be rooting hard for your son in St. Peter's. How's that? How about the younger one? What's his name? I'm sorry, your 14-year-old?
The older one is Matthew. The younger one is Brandon.
Brandon.
And Brandon, he's 14 years old, but he's already 6'3", by far the tallest one in the family. And he has a pretty good game. We expecting that one day he'll be playing Division I basketball in the NCAA also.
Well, that was my question, because these things start early these days, right? Have schools been to look at him yet, or is it a bit early for that?
We need a nice school for him because he's in Puerto Rico with us, but we'd like to get him in the States at a good school in the States so he can continue his development as a player over there.
Well, continue the family tradition as well, right? So
Right,
congratulations on all of that. And next year, when things return to normal, I assume you'll get to see some of Matthew's games, hopefully.
Yeah, we watch the games. They come on ESPN Plus and ESPN News tonight, so we kind of keep up with the games.
Well, next year when things are normal, and St. Peter's is in Albany to play Siena, I hope you attend live, and maybe we can get together and have a cold one or something.
All right, that sounds good.
Butch, I've loved having you on today. I'm glad that I know it was inconvenient with the situation you got there and hyperbolic chambers and everything. So
Yeah,
I appreciate you. I appreciate you coming on. I loved watching you play. I loved having you on, and you got a lot to offer to the audience. And I'm sure the Wit and Wisdom site will eat this interview up. They loved it when we had Lloyd on. So. I'd like to have you on again. I got to talk to you maybe about doing something with our Final Four show. I want to try to do something with some guys who have played in the Final Four. And I'll be in touch with you about that.
We'll keep in touch, and glad to be here with you this morning.
Excellent. I appreciate you coming. Thanks a lot, Butch.
All right, then. Bye.
Bye-bye. So, Butch Lee. Showed up a little late, but listen, when your wife's in a hyperbolic chamber and you can still get on my show, you're a dedicated individual. Thank you, Butch. Have a nice day, Dave Guyette, bugging out. So anyway, thanks to Butch Lee. We had to rush our interview a little bit, but I think we touched on all the talking points. I'm hoping to get Butch, and maybe I can talk to him about getting Bo Ellis, and I'm going to talk to Lloyd Walton about maybe getting on our Final Four show. All the guys, I want to get some players that have had experience in that Final Four and talk to them a little bit about that when we do that show on the 31st of this month. We're getting close to we're in March Madness right now with the tournaments, the conference tournaments, and we're heading towards more. So with that, Join me Sunday live at 9 a.m. We'll be covering all the tournament information, a little bit of Major League Baseball, probably some NFL news. Unfortunately, I hear I've got a couple people that have posted that my Patriots have signed Cam Newton, which I am not happy about. So I'm sure I will be railing on that, if not on a vlog later today, because I may not be able to wait until Sunday. I'm not happy. But that's for another show. Listen, my guest next week, by the way, will be Chuck Everson and Sonny Spira. Chuck played for Villanova in the mid 80s. I believe 80. Well, again, mid 80s. Sonny was maybe a year ahead of him at Syracuse. They've got a podcast of their own that they do now. But Chuck was on the Villanova team that beat Georgetown 1984, 85. Got a tremendous stories to tell. They've had some great guests on their podcast. We're going to have them on with us live next Friday as we continue our March Madness focus on Fridays. And I hope you will join us then. I will be on, as I said, Sunday, if not before. You're probably going to see me this afternoon, guys, because I am not happy about this Cam Newton information. So I'll get over it. I'm going to be on Mac and Jack in 15 minutes. I'll share the show live to TGI Sports Talk. Join me there. It's Keith Engel for TGI Sports Talk. Have a great weekend. I'll see you soon. On the Northeast Streaming Sports Network.